So we're looking at this picture where glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, has stripped the medicine out of our food. How did it do that? It did it through blocking an enzyme pathway. The enzyme pathway is called the shikimate pathway. It only exists in bacteria, fungi, and plants. Doesn't exist in humans. And for this reason, Monsanto and the other chemical companies have been saying it's super safe because its active target of the shikimate pathway doesn't even exist in your human cells, so how could it hurt you? Without explaining what the shikimate pathway was doing. Shikimate pathway makes tyrosine, tryptophan, phenylalanine, 5-HTP, all these building blocks, these amino acids for life. It's making those building blocks, and we can't make them because we don't have the enzyme. Glyphosate kills that enzyme pathway, and we start to lose the ability to build a healthy human body. What would it look like if we were building fetuses in an environment where there was no healthy building blocks or there was a lack of them? Well, it would start to misspell the amino acid strands, just like we would misspell words if we subtracted the O's and the U's. In the misspelling of it, we lose function. The enzymes don't fold quite right. The scaffold proteins that hold our cells together, the scaffold that holds the mitochondria and its special structure, everything starts to get a little perturbed, a little twisted, and it's not functioning well, and we would develop a disease vulnerability that's never existed in human beings. I believe that's our infants of today. You now take that infant and you now subtract out the microbiome from an antibiotic environment, born through C-section, never saw a mom's vaginal canal, so born sterile, put on a hospital gurney, immediately inherits the hospital flora, not mom's flora. That kid is now going to get invasive strep infections in the ears and in the throat over the first year and a half of his life because that's its flora. And so it's going to get antibiotics from its pediatrician by the time it's 9 months old for its first ear infection, and it's going to get antibiotics every 2 to 3 months from there until they're 12 years old. And then they finally take out the tonsils that are now so riddled with chronic strep that they dysfunction. So they just removed the main immune system of the upper respiratory tree. So now they're going to be more prone to the viruses, the retroviruses, all of the infections there. That's the slippery slope we have our kids on right now. How do we reverse everything? How do we get out of this disaster? 4% of the human population in 1960 had a chronic disease. 4%. Today, 46% of our children have a chronic disease. It's too ridiculous, it's too sad, it's too tragic on so many levels. So what do we do? Can we get those building blocks, and we can get them back so fast? There's documentaries being made right now, and there's science articles coming out right now. If you just go strict organic, where you do everything you can do to not let glyphosate touch the soil and the food that you can bring into your home, within 3 weeks, we see reversal of diseases that have afflicted families for decades. 3 weeks. That's grace. That's the power of the fabric we're made from. You screw up your whole life, and then you decide to do it right for 3 weeks, and everything improves. And don't we see this over and over again in our life? Forgiveness happens to humans. And when you forgive somebody, it changes a broken relationship that's been decades of toxicity and brokenness. We are being forgiven by nature today for what we've done. We have the opportunity to speed up our healing by forgiving each other as human beings for what we've done to each other as well. And it's one of the most fundamental truths about cancer is you are unlikely to heal from cancer if you don't forgive those that you're holding guilt and grudge and fear over. And 9 times out of 10, the first person that needs to be forgiven is the patient themselves. We need to forgive ourselves. We put too high expectations on ourselves in a day. We were programmed with a whole bunch of belief systems about what expectations we should have on ourselves. And so we hold this grudge, we feel this constant guilt. Forgive yourself today, because the program you had isn't from your soul. It was from a society that taught us to have a destructive, consumptive, non-sustainable way of life. And if you're fighting against that and there is friction and resistance in that, it's because your soul's trying to do the right thing. You showed up here on purpose. Start to pay attention to that. Blow apart your own expectations on self. Forgive yourself completely, and then immediately try to forgive those around you for what they've done. It was not out of awareness. It was out of their toxicity, their confusion, their unawareness, their isolation that they acted in the way that they did. Forgive, forgive, forgive. We will heal so very fast. You can imagine what it's like to be a scientist that started to uncover just a few truths. I'm every day convinced that I don't know anything, right? Because if you start to really question the fabric of life around you and you come to realize you know nothing about it, you now have to doubt everything that you previously thought about it. But I have found some truths with my team, and these scientists that I work around are brilliant, and they've given me so much information that's just so life-changing. And you can imagine how frustrating it is to sit with that information and not be able to get the world to change. It sets up a sense of hopelessness, desperation, everything else. And if it's not for well.org and all the other groups out there that are becoming the mouthpiece for truth, then we would have to give up hope. Our government's not going to change fast enough to save us. Our media, our print media, our internet media, all these big media forces that really define the vast majority of the information out there are owned by the very companies that would drive an unsustainable structure. We lost freedom of the media over the last decades, and that was probably the biggest thing that happened in the 1990s on the ultrastructure, is the government allowed for the monopolization of the media to happen, and it happened quick. Within a couple of years, we lost that real true voice in the media. And so what's happening at well.org, what's happening at all of these other grassroots level production companies that are now saying there is truth that needs to get out there and we need to change the way we think, the way we educate. You guys are that educational force, and so it gives me great hope to be a part of your project, to see well.org take any of this information out to the world. To be able to just have a megaphone to say, forgive each other, heal, be human, believe we can keep being human. Believe we can do things completely different all the time. Well.org, thank you very much for doing what you do.
I've had the honor of getting to know Dr. Zach Bush over the last few months and just become very aware of his work and some of the groundbreaking work that's been happening in the research in his labs. And one of the things that I've personally started taking in my personal life and my family life, sharing it with my kids, has been this product called Restore. The results are astounding, and so I called him in to just quickly just kind of talk about what this development is that's come out, because there are some very interesting results patients are having with this. So thanks for being here.
I appreciate you having me.
So how did you stumble upon this? I mean, you guys have been doing a lot of science, but there was this aha moment where you're like, oh my goodness, what have we found?
Yeah, that aha moment happened in 2012 in my clinic. So I was running a nutrition clinic, and we're seeing this phenomenon where people were getting more inflammation and sicker on health food. They were not reading the textbooks of nutrition, and they were not doing the right thing. So it was forcing us to ask deeper and deeper questions about the fundamentals of our food and where the food was coming from and how it was being produced. And in that journey, we started to ask not just about the food, but the soil it was growing in. And so a colleague of mine brought in an 80-page white paper on soil science. I was flipping through that quickly, and on page 40 of this thing is this giant molecule that heralded back to the chemotherapy that I had been developing just a few years earlier. And this massive aha moment of what if there was health and medicine in the soil itself. This is a departure from all these millennia of looking to the plants for our medicine. And so in that journey, we found that carbon molecule to be made by bacteria and fungi. And it started to answer this extraordinary question that had started to be posed not just by our labs, but by the global labs of there seems to be a correlation between the bacteria in the human being and what diseases they'll manifest. There seems to be a correlation between how much microbiome and ecosystems on that patient and their ability to heal. We, to this day, Stanford, UCLA, and UCSD, which are three of the leading programs in the world on this story of microbiome and its correlation with human disease, haven't really been able to put together what is the connection between those. Like, what is the fundamental mechanism by which the microbiome is powering human health or its loss is powering human disease? And so in that journey, we found that these carbon molecules were functioning as a communication network. And for the first time, we had something that we could look to in nature that wasn't going to act as a medicine, but instead just generate the information stream within the human body. And as we started to extract that, we knew the more rich the microbiome was, the better the material was going to be, because each species of bacteria and fungi makes a portion of this communication network. It makes a few words within this diverse language or fluent language of health and healing. And so with that, we started looking back in time in the soil. And it turns out as you go back 55, 60 million years ago, you suddenly hit soil levels that have really never been experienced in human history. deep, deep levels of soil. And these are found really in abundance in the deserts of the United States. In the high desert of the United States, you find evidence of these jungles that lived at the time of the dinosaurs and had microbiome that have never existed since that time. And so we figured that must be the richest, foundation or library, if you will, of these carbon molecules and all their diversity. And so we started doing different extraction processes of fossil soils. And in that journey, we found that many of these compounds have been studied before. The Chinese discovered something called humic acid and then fulvic acid, and the Indians had something called shilajit. All of these were extracts from fossil soils in the past. And so unbeknownst to my Western allopathic mind, this was not a new thought of there's something in there. Well, it turns out fulvic acid and humic acid and shilajit are great mineral sources, and that's why they were developed. Was human beings need minerals, they need the periodic chart to build health. We could go back there and deliver that. The problem with soil extracts, the fulvic acids, the humic acids, and the shilajit, is as a mineral delivery system, they're very oxidative. Oxidation is the process of rusting, tearing electrons off of the surface. So if you put water on steel, it rusts pretty quickly. The water is literally tearing electrons off the surface of the steel, and that turns into that oxidized, rusted surface. That same thing is happening in the human body when we develop chronic inflammation. We get oxidation. So the problems heretofore were that our soil extracts were actually adding to this oxidative stress and rusting potential. So they were giving great minerals, but they weren't doing that. And so we knew we had to figure out some way to get it to this non-oxidative state. And I knew this the first time I saw the molecule because of the research I had done. Was in something called redox molecules. And redox molecules are these molecules that are the contraction in word of reduction and oxidation. So we took reduction, oxidation, and turned it into redox. A redox molecule has the ability to both oxidize, meaning absorb an electron, and reduce, donate an electron. And so it acts as actually a signaling molecule that can say hydrogen, hydrogen, electron, electron, and exchange electrical energy across an environment. And redox molecules we knew were being made by the mitochondria inside our cells. And so my area of expertise is in endocrinology and metabolism, study of hormones and their regulation of the mitochondria to make lots of different fuel things, but also to help regulate the redox molecules that are the communication network of healing within the cell. I saw this molecule sitting in the soil. The goosebump moment was, that looks like it has redox potential. If you could get the hydrogen bonding back on that molecule, you could do redox outside of the human cell. And that was a cool thought, because heretofore we were really limited to our belief about the ability for redox signaling to work was really inside the human cell, was where that was going to work. These are very sensitive cells. They last for about 1/millionth of a second in real life. And so they're very ethereal dominoes that trip in the biochemistry. This molecule has this big giant carbon molecule made by the bacteria and fungi with the ability to transport electricity. So an exciting moment where we thought, whoa, there could be a communication network that has never touched human biology in the lab. We think we know cancer, we think we know heart disease, we think we know all these human diseases, but we've studied that in a sterile environment of the lab for all of these decades. What if there was a communication network of health and healing that's made by the ecosystem, made by the microbiome itself, that would induce the resilience of human life and biologic life that we actually see around us? Biology is very resilient. People heal, animals heal. What is that healing coming from? It's coming from really good communication. And so that's what we started to work on. Soil extracts. We got hydrogen bonding to come back into these soil extracts, turn it back into a redox potential where you can both donate and absorb an electron, eliminated the oxidative potential of delivery of nutrients to the cells, and put that wireless communication network back into life itself. And that was our paradigm leap that we made in our labs. And now, of course, we've turned that into a dietary supplement line to add back those basics of the microbiome to the foods that you're eating by getting that stuff into your gut before you can expose yourself to the world around you.
So you get the communication network that you've kind of reinvigorated, and so you have the redox going so it can transfer energy and information, obviously. And are there also kind of the elements of the minerals from the soils that you were able to keep in there without the oxidative effects? So you have high minerals plus the redox potential. And what does that do when you ingest? Does it also help create a milieu for the microbiome to thrive easier?
Precisely. Great questions. So there's about 64 micronutrients that are embedded in this kind of molecular carpet, if you will, of these carbon molecules. And the Redox now, it can deliver those in a non-oxidative fashion. And so you've got this balanced biochemistry delivery system that'll pull those nutrients in. The nutrients that we utilize in the product end up looking a lot like the skin of a sweet potato. The minerals and nutrients that you'd find in the skin of the sweet potato are going to be there represented in the product as we're trying to deliver that kind of basic building blocks of life. Amino acids are included in there, lots of minerals are included in there, and kind of these basic fundamental building blocks of life. And so that's the delivery system of the product. And the fun thing is to see that it's not just a dump truck backing up, dumping a bunch of resources. It's acting as a communication network, and what it does is communicate directly to the nucleus of the human cell to invigorate production of protein, production of lots of important enzymes, production of things like glutathione, which is the main antioxidant that your body does. Within 18 hours of exposure, the membrane is making 800% more glutathione antioxidant than it did just before it got exposed to the microbiome communication network. It upregulates DPP4 enzymes, so they're the enzymes that chew up the toxins in your gut, that would protect your gut lining. It upregulates the formation of tight junctions, or Velcro, that protects you from the outside world so that all the chemicals, plastics, weird stuff, and even naturally occurring things like the macrofiber in your food that are insoluble fibers in kale, that shouldn't get into the immune system. We see the proteins coming back together, tight junctions forming, human identity starting to really define itself behind that membrane so it can recognize foreign, it can react appropriately to the outside world, and not just overwhelming chronic inflammatory state.
That was kind of the original auspices under which I kind of landed on this, was someone that said, hey, look at how well this is addressing the tight junctions. We had a lot of leaky gut patients, there were people who were just these constant chronic debilitating conditions that were just very hard to take care of. And I looked at some of the evidence that was sent to me on this product and was just like, come on, right? I don't even understand what we're talking about here. So it was that jarring.
It is jarring, and the interesting thing about Restore, which is the dietary supplement that we've turned into here, is that it's the first time that I, as a doctor, have had something that's not trying to do something directly to the human cell. Vitamin C triggers a whole pathway in the human cell. Vitamin A triggers pathway in the human cell. Vitamin B's, the whole B complex, triggers specific enzyme pathways in the human cell. Vitamin D changes the immune system in the human. It's all this trying to force things. Pharmaceuticals, all of them with a human cell target. Every single pharmaceutical is trying to change some mechanism of communication or function within the human cell. For the first time, you're not going to do anything to the human cell. You're going to instead bathe it in just the wireless communication network. Picture cell phones for a moment. Your cell phone has a transmitter and a receiver that's capable of hooking you to any human being that's got another cell phone on the planet. But if you're further than a few miles from the nearest cell phone tower, nothing's happened to your cell phone, but it's suddenly rendered useless and isolated. This is what's happened to the human state as we've killed the microbiome, lost the communication network of the microbiome, and now sit in isolation with human cells not hearing the signal from around. Doesn't know how to go into cell repair. It has all the machineries to do cell repair, but it's not doing cell repair because it doesn't know there's a macro problem because the cell phone is down. The cell tower isn't getting there. You suddenly turn on the wireless communication network and all the cell phones start communicating. They all update their data. They all update their software programs. New apps download to repair things. Antivirus things get updated. You're now cleaning up the whole database and you're going back to normal function of a cell phone. Same thing with Restore into human system. People are chronically calling our customer support lines and our clinics to say, well, can Restore treat this? Can Restore treat that? Can Restore do this? Can Restore doesn't do anything. It's the first time that we've ever had anything on the shelf that's purpose is to do nothing. And that's why it's so damn safe, is it's not trying to do anything to you. It's simply giving you the option to have the wireless communication system so one cell can actually hear the other cell say, I need some DPP4 enzyme. Oh, okay, cell knows exactly how to make that in seconds, not minutes. And your body starts just simply doing the coordination of life that it would do all the time, every day. Restore has never healed a single person. the human body of those people has healed itself over and over and over again, because the inherent capacity for health and healing is alive and awake inside of each one of us. It just can't hear it.
I love it. I love it. It is a revolution in how we've productized everything, right, in the supplement space. So everything's kind of following the pharmaceutical model. Like, if you're missing this, then take this. This is philosophically very aligned with how I like to see things work, which is, let's just restore really the capacity of the human body and the resilience of the exchange of life to become kind of jacked into this network of life. And to me, that's very impressive that we have kind of come and crossed that chasm in medicine, and I think that it's going to help a lot of people really reconnect, right? I mean, you still got to live a healthy life, you still got to do these things, but now you have the substrate, you have this communication network that's working with you to facilitate your healing. So
perfect, and that's really what we tell everybody. This is your foundation, but not your end point. Where do you want to go? With your health, with your family, with your children's health, where do you want to go? You now have a foundation to rebuild the microbiome. This is sterile. There's no bacteria and fungi in there. It's the communication network that will start to coordinate the microbiome with the human body. And so now you got to go find that microbiome. And so where are you going to get in touch with that? It's in your backyard garden. It's on the hike this weekend. It's out at the beach next week. It's getting back out into nature. Think about the structure of your children's school day and flow. Are they touching nature frequently enough? Their school may have eliminated physical education, and may have eliminated their recesses, and may have eliminated their clubs. You know, all of these things have been steadily eliminated from our school systems across the country. How can you, as a family unit, start to really support not more homework, not more of that? How can you support the actual touch of that child back to their microbiome? Is your children sick? Is your child sick? Are your children suffering? Instead of looking at that as a medical problem, if we start to look at that as a nature deficiency, we get really close to reality. And so the nature deficiency, this is your foundation. Put the wireless network back up and then get outside and breathe it. Breathe the bacteria. We think of fermented foods and probiotics and prebiotics and all this stuff. That's a fraction of the story. The real story is, what are the animals breathing in your space? Are you breathing that? Are you touching the soil that's with the worms and the bacteria there? Are you in that? Are you really integrated into that nature as you once were? And the answer, if you're sick, is you're not. It's my one thing I'm most confident of. If I have somebody walking in the clinic and says, Doc, I'm super sick with anything, I can say, well, you got a lack of nature. And that's the story. And so Restore is the beginning of a fundamental foothold again in digging back into not just the soil that's outside. This is soil from 50 million years ago with an intelligence that's never been seen in human beings before. And when we put this into autistic children, we see them do things that we could have never imagined, because they're dialing into an intelligence, dialing into an information stream that's never existed in their parents or grandparents or any people's in their biologic history. I have great faith that Mother Earth is watching us swing this pendulum to the survival of humans or not. We have toxified our planet. We are dying in it. Nature's watching that and is going to take this moment and say, here's a truth like Restore. Here's a truth like 10 million other things that are going to be discovered out of nature. And we're going to find out that nature needed us to get to this extreme of insanity to find our full potential as human beings.
And come home to her.
Come home.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for doing the work that you've done in discovering this kind of miracle of nature and sharing it with the world. And if you're watching this right now and any of this makes sense, try it. Try it, right? Don't sit on your butt. Get up and try things that have helped people before you, and try things that make sense, because the other model is obviously not working.